Just a fact, 47% of our global wealth is earned by the richest 1% of people. This means that 99% of people on Earth, so basically everyone who is not a millionaire, only earns half of our money. Also, the richest 10% of people earns 85% of global wealth. These are ridiculous numbers. And although we live in Europe, where most of the times things don't seem that bad, global poverty is indeed a thing that is still happening. Continents such as Africa, South America and Asia struggle with poverty on a daily basis.
Every day, 1/3 of food made for human consumption is wasted. That equals 3.5 million tons of food daily. Maybe you don't notice how much food you waste in your household or workplace because you're not forced to pay attention to that, but we're gonna try and put these numbers into perspective.
I am Stan van Gelder.
And I am Jules Barrere.
And our goal is to wake up the hospitality industry by addressing the current problems in certain parts of the world. Buckle up, because we are in for a ride.
Food waste is still a massive problem in the Netherlands. About 1/3 of the total produced food ends up in the trash can. This never reaches the consumer's mouth. Consumers are the biggest culprit, accounting for 42% of the waste. Each consumer throws away 41 kilograms of food per year. Bread is the most wasted product in the Netherlands. Every day, 800,000 loaves find their way into the trash. Besides bread, dairy products, vegetables, fruit and potatoes are wasted the most. According to food waste expert Twan Timmermans of Wageningen University, the entire food chain in the Netherlands, consumers, supermarkets, restaurants and other institutions, throws away around 5 million kilograms of food every day. The Netherlands aims to reduce food waste by half by 2030. That will be a difficult task as the decrease was minimal in recent years.
The biggest waste occurs among consumers, 53%. But there's also a lot of waste within producing companies. Approximately 19% of food waste is generated in the processing industry. Food waste is responsible for 8% of the world's CO2 emissions. If food waste was a country, it will be the second largest emitter of CO2 after China and America. Food waste within the European nations account for 170 million tons of CO2 emissions. This is approximately equal to the total CO2 emissions of the Netherlands. So now that we have thrown a bunch of facts and numbers in your face, let's now talk about how we can make a change together.
And what if we don't make a change? What will be the effect of that? When we waste food, we're not just wasting food. We're also wasting all the resources that went into growing it. A great report by the NRDC illustrates just how much this adds up. Food waste ends up wasting nearly 1/4 of water supply in the form of uneaten food, or over $172 billion in wasted water. Each year, as a country, the US spent over $220 billion growing, transporting and processing almost 70 million tons of food that ends up going to waste. And if the land that we cultivate growing food that goes to waste in the US were all in one place, it would cover more than 3/4 of California. Growing food that goes to waste ends up using up 21% of fresh water, 90% of fertilizer, 18% of cropland and 21% of landfill volume. The UN is constantly busy trying to improve the world, and that's how they came up with the 17 SDGs in 2015, the Sustainable Development Goals. These goals are all unique and they are meant to improve everyone's life and save the world by 2030 by tackling the most important issues. This is a great initiative and the goal is to achieve all 17 of them, which can only be done together.
We saw and read about the 17 Sustainable Development Goals and zoomed in on the first two which seemed the most important to us. Especially zero hunger caught our eye immediately, because we've both encountered a lot of waste while working in the hospitality industry. The other goal we are going to zoom in on is no poverty, which can easily be paired together with zero hunger. Both SDGs are topics that are connected to one of the biggest trends nowadays. Everyone is finding a way in green living. People want to, but also people have to. The green living also faces the problem of no poverty. Costs will be saved by a better living standard.
The first sustainable development goal we're going to discuss is zero hunger, which is all about waste and food not being distributed evenly around the world. In the hospitality industry, waste is the primary problem that needs to be tackled. 5% of food wasted happens in the hospitality industry. That equals 65 million tons of food per year. And with waste, we're not necessarily talking about waste loss, which happens in the harvesting and production process, but we're mostly talking about throwing away food that is fit and still ready for human consumption. Food has its limits and costs a lot of money and energy to produce and to prepare. And that's why there needs to be taken action in the form of big non-waste initiatives. We came up ourselves with a couple of ideas and ways to reduce food waste in the hospitality industry. First of all, food is generally required to have an expiration date mentioned on this package, or it has to be mentioned somewhere else to be seen. These are an estimation. Dairy-like products and fruits are usually non-edible around the time the expiration date is reached, but there are hundreds and maybe thousands of kinds of food that have an expiration date which does not match with the actual expiration of the product. Things like salt and rice usually have an expiration date mentioned on the package, but this doesn't mean that the day after July the 3rd your rice is going to be covered in mold. Our first solution / idea is pretty simple. Just use your eyes, nose and if possible taste buds to check if an item is still usable or not. Don't trust the expiration date blindly, it's an estimation. Secondly, even if you are 99% sure you can't use a product anymore, don't throw it in the trash can straight away. There are lots of organizations and places where you can drop off food for free. Sometimes you even get a small fee in return for your effort. And the people there are even better in deciding which items can still be used and which items are destined to become waste. These organizations usually work closely with homeless shelters and other organizations that stand up against hunger. And thirdly, try and reduce your waste before it has reached the expiration date. You can find tons of zero waste initiatives online, which teach you a lot about using parts of products that you would usually just throw out. For example, the bones, which result from the meat getting cut off, still have a lot of flavor. Combine these with onion skin, garlic skin and other parts which you would usually throw out, and you can make a broth, which can give a lot of taste to your meals. And our last solution is more focused on the guests. It might sound as a lot of work for your kitchen staff, but try and offer your dishes in multiple sizes, in small, medium and large, for example. This way, the guest can choose for himself or herself what kind of portion fits the amount of food that he or she would like to eat at that moment in time. By doing this, a smaller amount of food will return to the kitchen unfinished, and food waste will be reduced big time. These are just 4 of our ideas that we thought would fit this talk the most and could make the biggest difference on a short notice. If your hotel or restaurant tries to implement these ideas as much as possible, we will collectively strive closer and closer towards a no-waste industry, and famine will be reduced by a lot. My fellow classmate Stan will now tell you some more about our second sustainable development goal, which is all about no poverty, and how tourism can have a huge positive effect on this.
If we now take a look to the next sustainable development goal, number 2, no poverty. Eradicating poverty in all its forms remains one of the greatest challenges facing humanity. But what does this mean for the hospitality? Everyone has goals in life and tries to get the most out of them. But what if these goals are held back by the environment and living conditions? Poverty can be relative when people do not have a certain minimum level of living standard compared to the rest of the society in the same or other country. Some nations develop their own poverty lines, or it can be absolute extreme destitution, a lack of means necessary to meet basic needs such as food, clothing and shelter, the same independent of location. One of the largest sectors in the world is also one of the biggest key drivers of the hotel industry. We are talking about tourism. What if you, as a tourist, can have a wonderful experience on holiday, but at the same time contribute to a little bit of improvement in the world? So to the next question is, how can tourism help poverty? Tourism is one of the largest and fastest growing sectors, labor intensive and therefore dependent on employment. It provides jobs, incomes and business opportunity at the community level, as well as opportunities for disadvantaged groups, such as young people and women, all in areas of a country that other sectors may not reach. The 3.1% growth rate is better than that of the economy in general, industry and retail. The big question is, how can we as tourism reduce poverty? Well, point 1. Tourism represents 1 in 11 jobs. That's exactly 284 million people worldwide. Point 2. 2.5 million new jobs are generated in 2015. Point 3. Tourism is ranked 3rd worldwide export category in 2015 after fuels, chemicals and ahead of food and automotive products. Point 4. Developing countries account for over 45% of world tourism arrivals and more than 35% of international tourism receipts. Point 5. In 2015, the 49 least developed countries earned 21 billion from international tourism. That's 7% of LCD's total exports, or 10% for non-all exporters. Tourism in many developing and least developed countries is the most viable and sustainable economic development option, and in some countries the main source of foreign exchange earnings. Whilst there is a risk that tourism further separates wealthy tourists in luxury hotels from poor locals prevented accessing their own natural heritage such as beaches, local people can be the tourism beneficiaries. There are now almost 1.5 billion international tourists whose expenditure can be a force for good worldwide. The potential for tourism to help eradicate poverty is enormous.
And now let's take a look at the guests. What are their benefits? By visiting a hotel who's willing to take action in anti-waste, you can go on a holiday without stress while still doing something positive for the environment and especially for the Zero Hunger initiative. By implementing our ideas into your hotel, you can give your guests the idea that they are part of the solution, even during their stay.
We think that when the hotels use our initiative and create their own zero waste menu, based on some of the solutions we gave before, the guests can choose for themselves whether they want to contribute to this movement or not. You can satisfy every customer's needs by doing this. We think that a lot of guests will try out this zero waste menu, and this will definitely make a change. And besides making a change, we also think that this initiative can keep a hold on your loyal guests and also attract a fair share of new guests. We have mentioned a lot of problems, ideas and solutions during this talk, but we genuinely believe that these are small changes that can have a huge effect in the global hospitality industry. And so, our belief is the smallest efforts can bring out the biggest changes. But we can only achieve the goal if we do it together and stand for it together.
And to help you guys remember our most important message of this talk, we created a strong one-liner to finish everything off. If you don't contribute to zero waste, you probably have zero taste.